This is James Spencer from Spencer Music and Artist Development, located in Long Beach, California. I am a musicologist and I'm also a film historian. And today I wanted to discuss Bernard Herrmann's musical score for Psycho and why, in my opinion, that is probably the greatest horror score of all time. It's so iconic. But a lot of fans of Hitchcock might not know specifically why that score was so successful. Why did it work so well compared to other horror scores? So I just wanted to go through some basic points of Bernard Herrmann's score and hope that that will give some light on some things. So what's first of all very unique is the whole score is completely scored for string orchestra and no other instruments. And, most people would think, well, that could create some challenges because, brass and percussion can be used to create masterful effects that punctuate the storyline and the action. And so by using strings, it creates this icy kind of unusual effect. And what's so wonderful is that the balance of range and of color is accomplished so masterfully. There's a symmetry between all the instruments. It's scored for first and second violins, viola, cello, and basses, and each part is also subdivided into sometimes two parts. So we get literally up to 10 voices in layering in this score. What is most important is Bernard Herrmann creates what became known by musicologists as the Hitchcock Core. And those are the very first opening punctuations of the orchestration during the opening credits. And that chord was specifically an ambiguous chord. And that ambiguity in that chord of what we call, it's basically a minor chord with a major seventh interval. The exact notes would be B flat, D flat, F, which create a B flat minor chord with the note A in the soprano voice. And that B flat to A is a very tight major seventh tension. And so it creates this ambiguity. And what's interesting is in that ambiguity, it sets up the tension and the dissonance, but it also sort of represents the ambiguity of Anthony Perkins' character as Norman Bates. This sort of passive, I wouldn't hurt a fly, and obviously the murderer. Masculine versus feminine, the sexual tension, all of that is started with those opening chords. It's interesting that he really is very specific in the orchestration at the punctuation of the instruments, the specific accents, exactly how those strings need to be bowed to create effects. And it's very, very masterful. The other thing he does is he understands that minor second intervals, and those are notes that are like if you think of a piano, it's the notes that are the closest together, like C to D flat or E to F. And those minor second intervals going back and forth create an incredible amount of tension and restlessness and dissonance and so forth. And that underlines the whole score throughout Psycho. What's fascinating is later on, John Williams will write one of his most famous scores, and that's Jaws. And in Jaws, the major theme of Jaws is the minor second. That's the shark's theme in the beginning. Okay, and that's used through the movie to create the tension of the shark attacks, right? So it was really Bernard Herrmann that kind of created this idea, and it's fascinating. When we see, as a voyeur, which we saw in Rear Window, when the Psycho opens up and we're going into the hotel room spying on Janet Leigh and Robert Walker, we get these icy descending in the very high register of ambiguous augmented fourths, and that interval specifically is dissonant. And there is a psychological thing with that as well, is back in early music history of the medieval period, the augmented fourth was called Diabolus in Musica, the devil in music, and it had a sinister quality, and of course it's very dissonant. And we get these sort of ambiguous perfect force and augmented force in this very icy descending thing. So instead of the music being a romantic scene, it feels unsettled, and we know that something's up. So even before Janet Leigh is killed in the shower scene, you know, we know she's doomed. You know, we get that feeling from the music, and you know, that is so psychological and very interesting. Another thing he makes use of in the score are what are called harmonics, and that's where if you barely put your finger on the string of a violin, for example, you can create these higher pitch harmonics that are very eerie. And he uses a lot of harmonics in the score on the violin to create effects. He also uses bowing with the wood of the bow instead of the actual horsehair, and that creates these eerie, airy, and metallic effects. So it's just very brilliant. Bernard Herrmann's use of you know, the orchestration in you know, in the Hitchcock Psycho. The last thing I'd like to talk about, of course, is the famous shower scene. And a lot of people, you know, and all you have to do is hear the first three notes, and we know, you know, with those shrieking violins and strings, that it's the shower scene. But how is that accomplished? And a lot of people might not know what he did. And using, again, dissonant intervals like major sevenths specifically, he also uses a technique called glissando. A glissando on the violin is where you take your finger and slide it quickly up the strings. And what he did is he used down bows with all of this sliding, starting with the highest register of the violins, and then keep adding all the instruments going lower, lower in the orchestra to create that incredible chilling effect. So thank you for joining me today, and there's just a little bit of my favorite Bernard Herrmann score for Psycho. Have a great day. Thank you.